our second respondent, Matej Kovacik, to deliver his response. Just a few words. Matej Kovacik is a postgraduate student at the Protestant Theological Faculty of Charles University here in Prague, and his research focus is on theological anthropology, and the topic of his dissertation is human being between religion, science, and art. So, Matej, the word is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for both your presentation and the first response. Now I think my response will be quite less sharp because I find myself quite in agreement with much of what was said. So up front I must say I'm sorry if I will just repeat some of what you already heard, but I have to follow some points of the paper to give context to my remarks. To me, this was a paper which was underlined by a delicate balance. That's what I would call it. The author, Justin, is trying to keep a delicate balance, which is underlined by that the first, 16 pages maybe, show how others have failed to keep this. So just a few words about them. That's as we heard, Nancy, Kearney, Westphal, Caputo. To this, I will say just, for example of the balance, even on the side of those philosophers who are not trying to avoid ontology but to overcome it, comes a disagreement and comes a problem, because there is the side of Caputo and Kearney and the other side of Westphal, and whichever side you pick, you have a problem. Either you stay untouched by empirical reality, while to some extent you overcome the dangers of ontology, or on the other hand, you have to overcome it all over and again in our every act. So, what we basically learn from this first part, I think, is this. Ontology, and speaking about after ontology, doesn't mean we can put ontology away. After ontology rather means we are after becoming aware that ontology is both something inevitable and potentially dangerous. And dangerous, I think, mainly for political reasons, because it can give rise to will to power and, in theological words, idolatry. Now, the second part, which was emphasized. One more thing I would like to say, that while the outcome of the first part is that ontology is inevitable, I would just add that this is here shown only concerning one particular philosophical tradition, the one coming from the French continuation of the phenomenological project and the authors of the so-called theological turn. But I think, and I am by no means implying that the author should have done those pages, but I think there are different traditions who, in the so-called philosophy, who tried to do away with ontology, and some failed miserably, maybe all of them, but as such, the question if the ontology is really inevitable of philosophy as such, I think remains still open. But I think the author is aware of that, and in the next part, he is trying to show how when we already agreed that ontology is inevitable, how to cope with it using two authors, Scrivers and the President Colby Dickinson. Enough was said about that, so I will skip this part. But in this part, I found some interesting topics which ring a bell, maybe surprisingly, to someone who is somewhat introduced in pragmatist philosophy. So we'll get to that later, and then will be my final and most important remark. But I have one more remark about how ontology is compared to original sin. There was some criticism heard from the first respondent. Mine is somewhat different. I think it looks like that the original sin, it looks like to me here, is meant in a little more maybe Protestant way, if I may say so. It really is something like an unremovable scar. And can we really compare ontology to that? Can really ontology be compared to original sin, as if ontology was the original source of all evil, but here on the intellectual grounds? Are metaphysics really inherently blasphemous? Can they not just be taken as another way to cope with reality? I'm not saying that there is anywhere in the text a direct equation between the two, but even if we have seen that ontology can be dangerous, I think we have not clearly seen that it is such a bad thing as original sin. And to add to that, I think the idea of original sin, I think, itself wouldn't make sense without some ontological background. Somewhere earlier in the text it is written that without ontology we cannot really make sense about truth claims about God, propositions which try to say something true about God. And thinking theologically, can we have truth claims about the world without truth claims about God? Is really ontology only evil, original, origin of everything dangerous and wrong in our philosophy? Then comes the part where the even more theological turn is proposed, which I basically agree. The phenomenological interpretation of love and then the Derrida-Agamben debate. I think these parts quite well introduce a way in which we could cope with the problem in theological setting. And now to my final remark and my probably biggest question, and that is to return to the pragmatist side of the story. Let me quote a sentence from earlier back in the text. This is not quote of Justin. This is already Justin quoting Adams, and I don't think it is his final word on anything. But I think it well underlines some delicate balance that goes through the text. And the quote is: "Ontological statements can be at most mythologically or metaphorically true, and that only insofar as they make a positive contribution to the wider religious praxis of producing saints. Second, if ontology is fine in its place, what is not all right is insisting that one religion, say Christianity, is superior to other because its ontology is literally true, while the others are literally false." Now, this sentence to a pragmatist ear sounds like a beautiful music. Not only are the ontological statements found good or bad only on the basis of praxis, here a wider religious practice of producing saints, even their truth value is found on the basis of the praxis. They can be at most metaphorically true, and that only insofar as they make positive contribution to wider religious practice of producing saints. That then brings me to the conclusion, which is, I think, the most interesting part, and here I will also quote. Basically, in the conclusions, the topic is to say how this acceptance, when we accepted that ontology is something like original sin, and when we took the theological experience with coping with original sin, how can this acceptance benefit philosophy? What can philosophy take from it? There is an example. Liberation theology, with its imperative trust to always care after those on the margins of society before oneself, is an initial and influential example of a theological discipline that would benefit the philosophy of religion especially. Now, what I see in this sentence, that the example which such theology gives to philosophy is again one of praxis. But that is with some disagreement with another statement in the conclusion, where Justin says, in conclusion, I would like to further implore the secular nature of this turn. It is not to turn philosophy into theology, nor to make it praxical. Rather, it is better to understand its historical reality of phenomenological understanding of the world and the self's worldhood of the world. But if this is not to make philosophy theological, nor to make it practical, I'm not sure there is anything else that remains. I think that actually this is about making philosophy practical, because what it takes lessons from theology is actually the praxis. One moment. Because if we have kept the notion of ontology, and even if we did admit that we can't do away with it, we have kept it not as something useful. We have kept it as a kind of original sin. We have kept it as a reminder of something that is wrong with our thinking. That is, I think, with such formulation, we cannot take any positive or cognitive or truth-claiming value from ontology. And as was said before, if there is no ontology, if there are no truth claims about God, I think only thing that remains, which gives ideas value, is the praxis. Thank you.